Now, if your administrator is not present for a PLC, the agenda is a little different. The first 10 minutes is spent talking about things that are very important in our lives, like what we would have done if we had won $1.5 billion. We use words like Downton Abbey and Kardashian. The next 10 minutes is spent talking about the things the principal has been doing that's been getting on our nerves. Then we lay out our data and we look at all of our red and yellow students. And we take about 15 minutes to talk about why the grade level below us sent us so many students that were red and yellow and what they can do to make sure that doesn't happen next year. Then we take about 10 minutes to discuss who it is that's going to type up the minutes of our meeting, and we end up rock, paper, scissoring to decide on that person. And then the last 5 minutes of the meeting is used to discuss what we're going to do this weekend and whether anybody has any good buy one, get one free coupons to Applebee's. That's what PLCs are like in the educational system today.
Okay, so we were on par with some of that. We weren't on par with some of that, but we did have PLCs that were not effective. The last 4 or 5 years, we would say that they were mainly planning meetings, that teachers had a PLC meeting every week. If they said we had PLCs, yes, we have PLCs. We meet every week. They were giving common assessments. And then occasionally looking at the data, but mostly they were planning meetings. And so we really wanted to bring a focus back to the data, to looking at how the students are doing and how we were going to intervene if we needed to. So our continued inspiration, our students, we constantly are thinking about them. We've seen a really big change just implementing this protocol, being able to just know where our kids are. Not to mention teacher capacity for formative assessments has grown tremendously this school year. So we're excited about that. So I'm going to go ahead and share our protocol with you. It does follow the 4 questions for PLCs. What do we want students to learn? How will we know if they've learned it? What will we do if they don't learn it? And what will we do if they know it already? I'm going to share the form that we use, and then I'm going to share an example with information filled in from one of our departments that does this. And our teachers meet once a week in their common course team. So for example, English 1 has a PLC, English 2, English 3, English 4, they have common plan and they meet individually with those groups. So here's what our protocol looks like, and I'm not going to take credit for this document. We did tweak it, but we also took it from another school district, tweaked it to make it our own, and I hope that you can possibly do the same. But this isn't a shared drive that every staff member in our school has access to, and it's in a little folder called PLCs, and then they're by department, and then they're by courses. So each week they put their minutes back in. They create their minutes at the end of the meeting. This is kind of a cyclical process. So at the end of today's meeting, they would create their agenda for next week, put it in that folder, and then they've got the template ready to fill out their data throughout the week. So they fill in norms. We make sure we start with norms. What do you want your meetings to look like? We encourage the PLC teams to create these on their own. What's important to them? Do you have a problem talking about Applebee's coupons? Then let's put that in our norms. We're going to stay focused and on topic. And then what they're going to need to bring. So there's a PLC leader in each group. We just put a little asterisk when we shared the PLC teams for the year. Who was that leader? That person is just in charge of typing as during the meeting. We didn't want this to be cumbersome for teachers, and once they got going with the process, it really turned out not to be cumbersome. The beginning, there was a little bit of a learning curve, and I'll kind of share some of the things we learned at the end. But we wanted this to be as smooth as possible. So we encourage the teachers as much as possible to fill this out during their meeting. Fill out your data ahead of time. That's your role, is to have your data in this form before the meeting starts, so our meeting can be efficient. But the rest of this information is stuff you're talking about in the meeting that you're filling out during the meeting. This is not extra time outside of that. So first thing they have are the agenda items. Again, these are already set from the last meeting when they start this meeting. What do we want the students to learn? They fill in their I can statement, their standards. This was one that we did change. It had standards, I can statements, essential skills, and it just got repetitive. So we did change the form as we went, and we were willing to do that. We let them kind of go for 2-3 weeks, we went in and to every meeting. And then after that, we got feedback. What do we like about this form? What do we not like? And then we changed it to make it a little bit more streamlined. So first question, what do they want the students to learn? There should be a standard that goes along with that learning target. If there's not, then that's something we have to talk about, why we're teaching it. Is that something we need to be teaching? And those are just discussions to have. And then what's the success criteria? So using the formative assessment, is 3 out of 4 questions your success criteria today? Did you do a 2-question exit slip and you wanted them to get both questions correct? Did you just need them to get the second question correct? So they're going to list, that's their discussion ahead of time. They discussed this the meeting before. What's the success criteria going to look like for the formative assessment? And we really had to get away from formative assessment being a quiz. There was a lot of, well, I have to give a quiz every week, or I have to give a 10-question formative assessment. We talked a lot about, like, this can be a Kahoot, this can be an quick exit slip. It can be anything that tells you where the kids are, and that does this kid get it, does this kid not? So how are you determining that? And we've seen some really creative formative assessments coming up. We've also seen a need for some more formative assessment training that we're looking forward to next school year providing. So it's just been a good process in terms of teacher learning, like what a formative assessment is. We do have, because our location, we do have a lot of teacher turnover. We have a lot of new teachers, and it's wonderful when we have new teachers with new ideas. But we do also have to check in that we're on the same page with what a formative assessment is and what it can be. So they list the standard here, and then they list you'll see in the example that's filled out, their name and their class period. So these columns get much bigger, or this table gets bigger and more columns get added. And they percent of the master standard 1, and like for English, a lot of times it's just 1 standard. For math, they might be talking about 2 standards. So they can change this as they go. They don't have to do 3 standards each week. They probably should be just doing 1 standard each week, but we put these in just in case they needed that. Some of them have kind of edited that out a little bit. So all of that is filled out ahead of time. And then this is kind of where they start their meeting. What topics, concepts, trends were most difficult for students? So they look at their data, they look at their questions, and they start to fill that out. What was most difficult for students? Did they struggle with identifying a theme? Did they struggle with the first meeting we went to, that our English 2 PLC, which is the one I'm going to show you an example of, they talked about they really struggled with the nonfiction text that had to do with technical language. It was based on technology. They did great on the other nonfiction tests, but that was one that they saw. So one of their next steps was to provide more practice with that kind of question. So they were able to see that through their formative. A lot of teachers are using Google Forms that make the data really easy to enter. It already tells you what your percentage mastery is there. And then GradeCam, we use GradeCam here as well, which does a lot of breakdown. So some of our teachers just like copy paste their GradeCam report into this, and it tells them by standard how the kids did. And then any instructional practices that can be shared to maximize student achievement. So this is where we're hoping, I didn't do as well, my kids didn't do as well on this topic, but your kids did. Can you share what you did in your lesson to really maximize that? And then they'll write that in there so teachers can go back and do that. So what did you do that made your students do really well? Did you do a different example than I did? Did your kids just were they all in attendance and mine weren't? Those kinds of questions. So those are really good conversations that they're having there. And then this is the bulk of our conversation. What do we do when they don't learn it? So this is where and this is in there ahead of time as well. They go ahead and they list their kids by name, which kids did not meet mastery. So they'll write it, they usually chunk it by class period, which kids did not meet mastery, so they can see. I had 10 kids that didn't meet mastery. I had 30 kids that didn't meet mastery. Now our teachers have about 150 students a day. So those numbers are going to be higher than maybe in an elementary school, but our teachers aren't used to naming and claiming their kids in the way an elementary teacher might be. And so this has been eye-opening for them. Sometimes they think a lot of their kids didn't do really well. And when they start listing their kids out, they see that they, most of them did meet mastery. There was just a smaller list than they thought, which is good, or sometimes it's a bigger list than they thought. So they start looking at this, and this is where we talk about, is this a tier 1 issue? Do we need to re-instruct in the classroom? Is this something where 80% of our kids did not get it and we're not ready to move on? Or is this, these are students that we need to have some intervention for? So we do have pullout interventions. We have some for English and math. So our science and social studies teachers, our foreign language teachers get creative with how they're going to intervene in the classroom without that pullout intervention option. But what activities are they going to do? How are they going to support this? And these are conversations they have together. So these are teams of 3, 4, 5 teachers. The special ed collaborator is also in there. So they have good input a lot on this part here. What interventions can other teachers who don't have a collaborator do in their room also to help with this area? So again, that's kind of the bulk of the conversation, is this number 3. And then number 4, what do we do when they've already learned it? This is an area of growth for us as well. What enrichment opportunities? You'll see in English, a lot of times they write silent reading. Those kids can just read their book, which some of them might want to, but we do have an area of growth there for what are some other things we can be doing when kids really have the topic. So we've seen some good examples there would be like that those kids are now going to be, they're going to be intentionally peer tutoring, or they're going to, and those are also individual teachers will know what works best for their students who are meeting that mastery, but also conversations that are happening. And then they have they were really worried about this taking up planning time. So this is kind of built into there as well. What essential skills being covered next week? What instructional strategies? So this is where someone's like, oh, I have this lesson I used for that last year. Does everybody have a copy of that? I really liked that lesson. And then they share that out with everybody. What supports do you need from colleagues? So that might be where they put, I need so-and-so's lesson from next week, and they'll make sure to share that. They might also say, so-and-so is going to create the formative assessment, the Google form for next week, and we need to have that ready. And then check out next meeting agenda items. They usually don't fill anything out in this box. They go ahead, open up a new document for next week and start filling out that agenda again for next meeting, and then what they need to have ready for the next meeting. So that this box checkout is kind of a reminder. Go ahead and get that agenda set up for next week so that it's ready to go. So that's kind of just the form. I'm going to show you an example of it filled out. Are there any, I don't have the chat open. I don't know. Are there any questions so far there? Okay, so here's the form that's, let me see. Here's the form that has the example. Actually, let me just check real quick in the chat. Okay. So here's the example document. And you can see, and I'll go through it quickly. They put their names, who was present, the start and end, these are their norms, start and end on time, stay focused, remain positive, come prepared. Those are the 4 things. This is our English 2 PLC that they wanted to focus on. They wanted them to bring data and then their technology, so their like teacher laptop that they might need. Agenda items, they're going to discuss the formative assessment data. They're going to develop the next formative assessment, and then they're going to talk about materials that they're going to provide the intervention teacher for the students that they're going to send. And we send them weekly, so they really target specific skills that they're going to work on. So their essential skill for this week, I can analyze a character's development over the course of a text, and their success criteria was 75%. On the formative assessment. So it's not 4 out of 6, but this is our English department. So we'll have that there. But so they would put their 4 out of 6, what they wanted them to do. So that would be like 67% there. And then they go ahead, and this is all entered in ahead of time before they even get to the meeting. So at the meeting, they just pull this data up because they want time to be able to plan for that next assessment as well. So they list their class periods, and they list the percent of students that mastered the topic, and it was just 1 standard this week, comprehension of grade level appropriate text. So that was what they were looking at. So And you can also see Miss Gash teaches our pre-AP classes. So her groups are, she's got a couple of those, her groups might be a little bit higher. Miss Medina is co-teaching. So you can see in her groups, they're a little bit, you know, there might be some lower groups, and that's okay. Those are just conversations to have. We also talked about, you can see Miss Mobley didn't get to 2 of her classes. We had to do a lot of upfront work with teachers that it's okay if you don't have data in 1 week, if you don't have data in 2 weeks. We know there's a lot going on right now. And to start something like this year was a little bit stressful for teachers. And so we wanted to make sure we let them know, you are not to force your students to do something that they're not ready for. We're going to try and stay on track with the other teachers, but if you didn't get to it this week, that's okay. If you were absent because your kid was quarantined, we're not gonna come knocking at your door for your data. So, you know, do our best. We're going to get, if it's every week for a month, then we might have to have conversation about, you know, how we can get caught back up, but it's okay. We're being flexible. We're working with everybody. So we wanted to make them know, like, this is not a gotcha moment. If you're at 52%, we're not coming in to be like, what's going on in 6th period? We just want you to be able to work with these students. It's truly to make sure we're working with every student at their level. So I blacked out last names, but then they go ahead and they list the students' names. This group has put IEPs in bold. Not every group does that, but that's helped them. The collaborator is able then to kind of work with those students and possibly not pull them for intervention, but she can work with them in class, maybe in a different way. So they list their kids. You can see some teachers don't have very many kids to send to interventions and some have a lot, and that's okay. Again, and some of these kids, like the conversations they might have are, this kid's been absent for 10 days. They were quarantined and they tested positive, all those things. So these are all just, it's not any sort of evaluative form on their end. It's for them to know which kids are not mastering it. How do I get them caught back up? And then they go ahead and list some ideas for how they're going to reach these kids for interventions, what they're going to do for enrichment. And then they build out their topics for next week, instructional strategies they wanted to discuss. And then I liked this one. It said, supports do you need from colleagues, school administrators, or district administrators? It says maybe less testing. We have new leadership at our district office as well. So we have some new tests we're giving instead of math, and it has been a lot. So I think they want less testing so they can kind of work, but it is giving us really good data as well. So it's a double-edged sword there. And then they check out, they go ahead and write what they're going to do next week. And then they went ahead and opened up their new document to share or to start planning for the next week. So the whole entire meeting, they have 45 minutes for the meeting. I would say this takes like 30 at the most, and then they get time to plan as they need during that time. So let's see. Yeah, so these are our lessons learned. We learned rollout's really important. So we did have a meeting with each PLC where myself and one of the other assistant principals, and then our principal went into every meeting in groups of 4 or 5. So we had 4 meetings a day for a week where we went in and we wanted the same wording to come to all the groups that were doing this. And we made sure to walk through the form just like I walked through it with you. They asked questions. We shared, our expectations. They had been sharing data. A few years ago, they shared data, and it was really a traumatic experience for a lot of our teachers. They had to get up and present in front of the whole department, and then they were asked questions about why their kids weren't performing at the same level as this other teacher. And so we had to talk some of them off the ledge that we weren't doing that. We were presenting to one another, and our focus was on students and not on them. It was on getting the students back on track after these COVID years, and finding ways to make sure we're monitoring where they are. So we told them that. Some of them still were nervous, but as we went through and they really saw that that's what was happening, they started to be okay with it. So rollout's really important. I think it's important for it to come, the message to come from the same person. Teachers need support. They need flexibility. They need compassion. So we made sure to be in these PLCs every week for the first month. And then we told them we're going to back off. If you want us to come, we'll be there, but we will pop in sporadically. And we've been coming about once a month now to kind of just be there to listen, to support. We do check the minutes in the Google Drive. but we're there for support. We wanted to make sure the first 4 weeks that they really got the hang of it and that they understood the process, that groups weren't spending hours upon hours filling out this form. That wasn't the intent. So keep the vision. So we wanted to make sure our vision was on students, and we kept it on students, and it stayed on students the whole time. It's okay, not everyone's going to be on board right away, and that's okay. They'll come along or they won't, but for the most part, we also rolled this out to our department chairs first. So they were able to be like, they saw it first, they could support it, they could ask questions, share their concerns first, and then share, and then they were in there as we rolled it out to their departments too. So they felt kind of part of the process, and they were part of the process in sharing, making sure this worked in their department. Tweak. I said, it's okay to tweak it. It's okay to say, like, we had that form set how we wanted it, but it didn't work that way. We had too many questions on there. So we took some off, and that works even better. And then monitoring and follow through, just as important as the rollout. So making sure we are in there at least once a month in each meeting, so that they're, you know, that everybody stays on track and our focus continues to remain on our students. So we've found that this has been a really good, stop my screen sharing here. This has been, it's really changed the way we do things, looking at curriculum, looking at our curriculum, looking at our assessments, formative assessments. It's really helped us to kind of move forward with what we want to do to monitor students. So I'm happy to share any of those documents at any time. So if you are looking for it, I'm happy to share it. Any questions? I know I'm 3 minutes early here, so. Do you have specific time in our schedule dedicated working with students who need remediation? Yes, we do have. We have interventions scheduled during their advisory time, so which is half of their lunch. So they're pulled out 30 minutes for math or English or reading 4 times a week, and the teachers will assign them 1, 2, 3, or 4 times. We're kind of switching that up this semester a little bit, so they'll be in there for 1 week or 2 weeks, all 4 days, to work on some reading remediation and some basic skills. But essentially the teachers will assign them as needed. We encourage the teachers not to assign kids if they've just been absent, like if they can catch up. If it's just absence and they're going to be able to catch up in class, then we want those kids to do that way and really focus that intervention for the kids that are really behind and struggling with those basic skills. Any other questions? Okay, so if you have anything else, please. Oh, sorry.
Thank you so much. I'm sorry I wasn't here to introduce you. We were having technical difficulties.
Oh, you're
this
good.
morning. This was great. Thank you for sharing with us.
Thank you. If anyone has any other questions, email, anything, I'm happy to share. So.